Ethan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-drunk cup of coffee his wife Melissa had left behind. It was cold now, like the air in the house. She had walked out that morning after another argument, raving violent. Nothing dramatic, just quiet words that carried too much weight. "I need space," she'd said, grabbing her coat without looking back. He didn't chase her. Maybe because deep down, he knew chasing wouldn't fix what was already broken. The house felt too big without her laughter, too still without her humming from the next room. They'd been married for 8 years. The first 5 were filled with shared dreams, small adventures, and laughter. But lately, it had turned into distant missed dinners, unspoken resentment, and endless silences. Melissa had become a stranger in their own home. Ethan tried to hold things together, but work stress, lost communication, and pride built walls between them. Now she was gone, and all he could hear was the ticking clock on the wall, each second reminding him of everything he didn't say. By evening, Ethan found himself pacing the living room, unsure what to do next. He replayed every word from their last conversation. Maybe if he had just listened more, softened his tone, or reached out when she turned away, things could have been different. He tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. What was there to say? Come home felt too heavy. I'm sorry felt too late. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of the doorbell. His heart skipped. Maybe Melissa had come back. But when he opened the door, it wasn't her. It was her mother, Linda. She stood there holding a small suitcase. Her silver hair tucked neatly behind her ears. Her expression calm but knowing. She called me, Linda said softly. Told me she needed time away. I thought maybe you could use some company. Ethan hesitated. He hadn't expected her. In truth, he wasn't sure he wanted anyone there, especially his mother-in-law. Their relationship had always been polite but distant. Still, he couldn't turn her away. He stepped aside and let her in. The familiar scent of lavender followed her as she walked in. It's the same scent Melissa used to wear. For a while, they didn't talk much. Linda unpacked a few things, then made herself a cup of tea while Ethan sat in silence, trying not to think about how strange it felt having her there instead of his wife. But Linda wasn't there to judge or question. She simply moved around the kitchen like she had done it 100 times, tidying up, humming faintly under her breath. There was something oddly comforting about it. Later that evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Linda spoke first. She's been unhappy for a while, Ethan. You both have. Ethan didn't argue. He just stared at the flames. You know, Melissa loves deeply, Linda continued. But when she feels unheard, she closes off. It's not about blame, it's about both of you losing your way. Ethan sighed. I thought I was doing my best. Providing, being there. But maybe I wasn't really there. His voice broke slightly. Linda nodded, her eyes soft. Sometimes being there isn't about fixing things. It's about feeling them together. The honesty in her tone surprised him. He'd expected comfort, not truth, but maybe that was what he needed. They talked for hours that night. Not about blame or regret, but about understanding. Linda shared memories of Melissa as a child. Her stubbornness, her quiet nature, how she'd always needed reassurance even when she pretended she didn't. Ethan listened, realizing how little he truly understood the woman he loved. The next day, Linda insisted they clean up the house. A quiet space helps a quiet mind, she said with a smile. They spent the day dusting, fixing small things, and cooking together. Ethan found himself laughing for the first time in weeks when Linda dropped a dish and blamed getting old. It was light, simple, human, something he hadn't felt in so long. As night fell, Ethan sat outside on the porch, watching the streetlights flicker. Linda joined him, handing him a cup of tea. You're still young, Ethan, she said gently. You still have time to make things right. But not just with Melissa, with yourself too. Her words lingered in his mind long after she went to bed. He realized he had been so focused on saving the marriage that he had forgotten how to care for himself. Maybe that's what Melissa had felt too. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. There was warmth in it, now small, steady, and real. Before going to bed, Ethan walked past the living room and noticed something on the table, an old photo of him and Melissa from their early days. They were both smiling, carefree, and in love. He picked it up and whispered, "I'll find a way back to that." That night, for the first time since she left, Ethan slept peacefully. He didn't dream about her walking away. Instead, he dreamed about her turning back. But life had its own plans. The next morning, when he came downstairs, Linda was already dressed, waiting by the door. "I need to run an errand," she said. "But there's something I want to talk about when I get back." Her tone was gentle, almost secretive. Ethan nodded, curious as she stepped outside. Ethan watched her leave, unaware that her visit was about to change everything, not just for his marriage, but for him in ways he never expected. And as the door closed behind her, Ethan couldn't shake the strange feeling that her errand was more than it seemed. Something in her eyes had carried a quiet purpose. He didn't know it yet, but Linda wasn't there just to comfort him. She was there to teach him something about love that would alter his life forever. The next morning, Ethan woke to the smell of pancakes and coffee. The sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, and for a moment it almost felt like old times. Linda stood by the stove, humming softly, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. "Morning," she said warmly when she saw him. "You looked like you needed a good breakfast." Ethan smiled faintly, still feeling the weight of the last few days. "Thanks," he replied. "You didn't have to," she shrugged, her eyes kind. When someone's hurting, feeding them is the easiest way to start fixing things. There was something comforting about her calmness. Ethan sat at the table and they ate together quietly. For the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. After breakfast, Linda surprised him by saying she wanted to go for a drive. "There's a small lake just outside town," she said. "Melissa used to love it there as a kid. Let's go." Ethan hesitated, but something in her voice made him agree. They got into his old pickup and drove through winding roads, trees flashing past as soft music played from the radio. The world outside looked brighter, though Ethan still felt a quiet ache inside. When they reached the lake, the air was cool and still. The water reflected the sky like a mirror. They walked along the edge, stopping near a small wooden bench. "She used to come here with her father," Linda said, her gaze distant. After he passed, she stopped visiting. "I think it reminded her of too much." Ethan sat beside her, listening to the gentle sound of the water. "You and Melissa were always close," he said. Linda nodded. "We were. But even I didn't notice when she started to fade in her own life. She stopped doing the little things that made her happy." Her words hit Ethan deeply. He realized he had done the same, letting routines and stress replace the joy they once had. He looked down, guilt clouding his face. "I thought I was being responsible. I thought love was about providing." Linda turned to him. "Love isn't just about holding things together. It's about holding each other through the mess. Melissa needed you to see her, Ethan, not just live beside her." Her voice wasn't accusing, only full of quiet truth. They sat there for a while, watching ducks glide across the lake. Linda finally smiled faintly. "You know, when Melissa called me, she didn't sound angry. She sounded tired. She said she didn't know who she was anymore. Maybe she just needs to find herself again. But that doesn't mean she's given up on you." That gave Ethan a strange kind of hope, small, fragile, but real. "Do you think she'll come back?" he asked softly. Linda didn't answer immediately. "That depends on whether you'll be ready for her when she does." On their way back, they stopped at a small diner. Linda ordered apple pie, and Ethan joined her. "You know," she said between bites, "you remind me a little of her father, always trying to fix everything yourself. He learned, though, that sometimes love means letting others help you." Ethan smiled for the first time in days. "You have a way of saying things that make too much sense," he said. Linda laughed. "That's what mothers are for." That evening, when they got home, Ethan felt lighter. He cooked dinner for both of them, simple pasta, but he made it with care. They ate together, talking about everything but the pain. Linda shared stories about her younger years, her travels, her dreams, the mistakes she made, and what they taught her. Ethan listened with fascination. She spoke with honesty and grace. not hiding her flaws, but wearing them like old jewelry. Later that night, Linda went to her room, leaving Ethan alone in the quiet living room. He looked around and realized how much life had returned to the house since she arrived. It wasn't just her presence, it was her energy, her calm wisdom. She didn't try to fill the silence. She simply made it feel less lonely. As days passed, a routine began to form. Ethan worked during the day and Linda took care of small things around the house. Every evening they shared dinner and conversation. She had a way of making him reflect on things without even trying. One evening, she asked him, "What do you miss most about Melissa?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Her laughter," he said quietly. "The way she made everything lighter. She used to dance in the kitchen, sing off-key, burn toast, and laugh about it. I used to love that." Linda smiled gently. "Then maybe start by remembering that version of her, not the one who walked away. Sometimes we lose people in our minds before we lose them in real life." Ethan nodded, her words sinking deep. He realized that the distance between him and Melissa had started long before she left it began when he stopped seeing her the way he used to. One rainy evening, Linda found him in the garage, fixing a loose shelf. "You're always fixing something," she said, handing him a towel. "Maybe that's your way of healing." Kay chuckled softly. "Maybe it keeps my hands busy when my head's too full." She leaned against the wall. "Just don't forget to fix what's inside, too." There was a warmth between them, gentle, unspoken, born from shared understanding. Not romantic, not yet emotional in that sense, but deeply human. Linda saw in Ethan a man trying to find himself again. And Ethan saw in her the strength of someone who had lived through pain and learned to move with it, not against it. A few days later, Melissa called. Ethan froze when he saw her name on the screen. His hands trembled slightly as he answered. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "Hey," she replied. There was a pause, heavy but not cold. "Mom's with you?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "She's been helping me." "Helping us, I guess." Melissa's voice softened. "Good. I'm glad." She didn't say much after that, but before hanging up, she whispered, "Tell her I love her." Ethan sat there for a long moment, holding the phone, feeling something inside him shift. When he told Linda about the call, she smiled knowingly. "She's thinking about you," she said. "Give her time. But don't just wait become the man she want to come home to." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, rain tapping softly against the glass, thinking about everything Linda had said. Maybe love wasn't about holding on too tight. Maybe it was about becoming someone worth coming back to. The next morning, Linda found him outside, washing his car. He looked peaceful, almost renewed. "Starting fresh?" she asked. Ethan grinned faintly. "Something like that?" She nodded approvingly. "Good. Sometimes cleaning what's outside helps clean what's inside too." But just as the day began to feel hopeful, Linda received a call that changed the tone entirely. Her face went pale as she listened, then quietly excused herself. Ethan noticed her hands trembling slightly. When she returned, her eyes were distant. "It's nothing," she said, forcing a small smile. But Ethan could tell something was wrong. He didn't press her, not yet. But deep down, he knew the woman who had come to heal him might be carrying a pain of her own. And whatever it was, it would soon pull both their lives in an unexpected direction. For the next few days, Ethan noticed something different about Linda. She still smiled, still talked warmly, but there was a faint distance in her eyes now. Sometimes he'd catch her staring out the window, lost in thought, her coffee growing cold in her hands. He didn't want to intrude, yet he couldn't ignore the worry that had quietly settled inside him one evening. After work, he found her sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and pink. "You're quiet tonight," he said gently. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just thinking," she replied softly. "It's beautiful out here." Ethan sat beside her. "It is," he said, "but you look like you're somewhere else." Linda hesitated, then sighed. "I got some news the other day." "About my health." She paused, searching for words. The doctor found something during my last checkup. It's not life-threatening, but it's serious. I'll need treatment. Ethan's chest tightened. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. She looked at him, her expression calm. Because you've already been through enough. I didn't want to add to your burden. He shook his head. You've been holding me together, Linda. You don't get to carry this alone. She smiled faintly at that, the kind of smile that said she was touched but still afraid. You sound like her, she said softly. Like Melissa, when she used to look after everyone else but herself. Ethan didn't push her after that. Instead, he made sure she ate properly, took her medicine, and rested. It wasn't out of obligation, it came naturally. He found himself caring deeply, not just because she was his wife's mother, but because she had become a part of his healing. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, Ethan found a photo album Linda had left on the coffee table. It was full of pictures young Melissa with her parents, family trips, birthdays, laughter frozen in time. He saw Linda in her younger years, full of light, and beside her, her late husband smiling proudly. Ethan flipped through the pages slowly, feeling a sense of warmth and sorrow mix inside him. Linda walked in quietly and noticed him looking. She had your same stubbornness, she said with a soft laugh. And you have his. She pointed to her late husband's picture. Ethan smiled faintly. Seems like it runs in the family. They talked for hours that evening. Linda shared stories about how she met her husband, how they struggled at first, and how love wasn't always easy but worth it. Her stories weren't just memories. They were lessons disguised as conversations. You see, she said, real love doesn't disappear when people walk away. It lingers, waiting for us to find our way back to it. Ethan felt that truth deep in his bones. He started writing letters to Melissa, not to send them, but to clear his heart. He told her how sorry he was, how much he understood now, and how he wanted to rebuild himself for both of them. Linda read one of the letters one evening and said quietly, "That's the man she fell in love with. Keep being him." Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's home began to feel alive again. He cooked more, fixed small things around the house, even started painting, something Melissa had always wanted to do together but never had time for. Linda encouraged him every step of the way. "You're learning to live again," she said proudly. But despite the warmth between them, Ethan noticed that Linda's health was slowly declining. Some days she looked exhausted and her hands trembled slightly when she held her tea. He wanted her to rest, but she refused to stop helping. "Keeping busy keeps me sane," she'd say with a light laugh. One cold evening, Ethan came home from work to find Linda sitting by the fireplace, reading one of his letters again. "You write beautifully," she said softly as he entered. "Melissa would be proud." Ethan sat down across from her. "You helped me find those words," he admitted. "You made me remember what love is supposed to feel like." There was a pause, filled with quiet emotion. "Sometimes," Linda said, her voice low, "we come into people's lives not to stay, but to help them see the light again." Ethan frowned slightly. "Don't talk like that," he said. "You're not going anywhere." She gave a gentle smile. "We never really go anywhere, Ethan. We just leave pieces of ourselves and people who needed us." Her words stayed with him all night. The next morning, he found a note on the kitchen counter. It was from Linda. "Went to see the doctor. Don't worry. Be back soon." But hours passed and she didn't return. Ethan called her phone repeatedly, his anxiety growing. Finally, she answered, her voice tired. "I'm fine," she said. "I just needed a moment by the lake." Ethan didn't hesitate. He drove straight there, the same lake they had visited weeks before. When he found her, she was sitting on that same wooden bench, wrapped in her coat, staring at the still water. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, breathless. She turned to him with a smile. "I came here to remember," she said, "to remind myself that life, even with its pain, is still beautiful." He sat beside her, the chill of the air forgotten. "You've changed this place for me," he said quietly. "I used to come here to escape. Now I feel peace here." Linda looked at him kindly. "That's what healing feels like. It sneaks up on you when you stop running from yourself." They sat in silence for a while. The sky darkened and the first stars appeared. "Melissa will come back," Linda said suddenly, as if reading his mind. "I can feel it. She's been searching for her peace too." Ethan didn't reply, but deep down he believed her. When they returned home, Linda looked tired but peaceful. "Promise me something," she said before going to bed. "If she comes back, don't waste time on guilt. Just love her better." Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. That night, he dreamed of Melissa standing at the lake, smiling at him. When he woke, the house was quiet, too quiet. He knocked on Linda's door, but there was no answer. For a terrifying moment, he thought the worst. But when he opened the door, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching the sunrise through the window. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "No," she whispered. "Just wanted to see the morning one more time." Ethan sat beside her, unsure of what to say. She took his hand gently. "You've been good to me, Ethan. Thank you for letting me be part of your healing." He shook his head. "You did more than that, Linda. You gave me back my life." Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled through them. "Then my job here is done." That morning, Melissa called again. Her voice was softer, calmer. "I've been thinking a lot," she said. "About us?" Ethan felt his heart race. "So have I." There was a pause, and then Melissa said, "I'd like to come home, if you'll have me." Ethan closed his eyes, emotion flooding him. "Always," he whispered. When he told Linda, she smiled weakly. "See? I told you." Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for his. "Now you can start again." Ethan didn't know it then. But that would be one of their last conversations before everything changed again. The morning Melissa returned. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of rain. Ethan stood by the window, his hands trembling slightly as he waited. He hadn't slept much the night before. Every minute had felt like an hour. Linda was sitting at the kitchen table, holding her tea, her expression calm yet distant. "You'll do fine," she said softly when she saw his nerves. "Just be honest." "Okay," Ethan nodded, trying to steady his breath. When the car finally pulled into the driveway, his heart nearly stopped. Melissa stepped out slowly, wearing the same green coat she'd left in. She looked tired but softer somehow, like someone who had been walking through a storm and finally found her way home. Ethan opened the door before she could knock. For a long moment, they just stood there, the silence filled with everything they hadn't said. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he replied, his voice breaking. They didn't hug right away. Instead, Melissa looked around the house, noticing small changes the plants Linda had brought in, the paintings Ethan had started. "You've been busy," she said. He smiled faintly. "I had help." Then Linda appeared in the hallway, her steps slow but steady. When Melissa saw her, tears filled her eyes. "Mom," she breathed. Linda smiled warmly. "You didn't think I'd let him destroy the place, did you?" The three of them laughed softly, breaking the tension. For the first time in months, the house felt alive again. They sat together, sharing coffee and hesitant words. Melissa spoke first. "I left because I didn't know how to love you without losing myself," she said. "But being away showed me that love isn't supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be patient." Ethan listened, his chest tight. "I wasn't patient," he admitted. "I tried to fix everything, even you, when all I needed to do was listen." Linda watched them quietly, pride and sadness mixed in her eyes. "You two sound like me and your father," she said softly. "We used to fight too, but every fight was just another way to learn how to love better." The day went on, and for a few hours it felt like the past hadn't happened. They cooked dinner together, Melissa's favorite pasta, Linda's recipe. The house was filled with laughter and the smell of garlic and butter. It was simple, ordinary. And yet it felt like everything Ethan had been praying for. But later that night, as the rain began to fall, something changed. Linda excused herself early, saying she felt tired. Ethan noticed her hands shaking slightly, but didn't say anything. "Get some rest," he said. "You've done enough for today." She smiled softly. "Not yet." In the middle of the night, Ethan woke to the sound of thunder. He went to check on Linda and found her sitting by the window, a blanket around her shoulders. Her face was pale but peaceful. "You should be sleeping," he said gently. She turned to him, her eyes full of warmth. "I just wanted to see the rain," she whispered. "It reminds me of new beginnings." He sat beside her, the two of them watching the water streak down the glass. "You were right," he said quietly. She came back. Linda nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Because you learned how to let go. Sometimes love returns when we stop chasing it." Ethan reached for her hand. "Thank you, Linda, for everything. For saving me when I didn't know I needed saving." She squeezed his hand weakly. "You saved yourself, Ethan. I just reminded you where to look." The next morning, the rain had stopped. The air was fresh, the world quiet. Ethan walked to the kitchen to make coffee and noticed the note on the table. His heart sank as he read Linda's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I finally went to rest. Don't be sad. I had the joy of seeing my daughter happy again and knowing you found your light. Take care of each other for me." Ethan froze, his mind refusing to believe it. He ran to her room, but Linda was gone, her eyes closed peacefully, a faint smile on her lips. Melissa appeared behind him moments later, her voice trembling. "Mom?" When she saw the note in his hand, she broke down, clutching Ethan's arm as tears fell freely. They sat together for hours, holding each other, their grief quiet but deep. But even through the pain, there was peace. Linda had given them something rare, a second chance at love and life. Weeks later, after the funeral, Melissa and Ethan visited the lake where Linda used to sit. They scattered her ashes into the water, watching as the wind carried them gently across the surface. "She said love never leaves," Melissa whispered. "It just changes shape." Ethan nodded, his hand tightening around hers. "Then she's still here," he said softly. Time passed, and their home slowly filled with warmth again. They laughed more, cooked together, and even finished one of Linda's unfinished puzzles, leaving one piece missing just the way she liked it. Sometimes Ethan would catch Melissa staring out the window with that same thoughtful look her mother used to have, and he'd feel both sadness and gratitude. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Melissa turned to him. "You know," she said softly, "Mom always said love isn't about holding on, it's about growing together. I think I finally understand what she meant." Ethan smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Then maybe this time we'll get it right." Years later, Ethan would still visit the lake on quiet mornings. He'd sit on the same bench Linda used to love, coffee in hand, the water calm before him. Sometimes he'd swear he could hear her voice in the breeze. "You're doing fine, Ethan." And I was. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was full again, full of laughter, forgiveness, and quiet love. He'd learned that people don't always stay forever, but the right ones like Linda leave something behind that does. And as he watched the sun rise over the lake, Ethan whispered into the wind, "Thank you, Linda. You changed everything."